Welcome to Executive Insights. My guest today is Benjamin Jacob, partner with IBM, responsible for cognitive process automation and reengineering. In this episode, Benjamin shares how having a background as a professional engineer helps to shape his philosophy in sales. We explore best practices for engaging with customers and employees under the current working conditions and what IBM is doing to prioritize professional development for its workforce. We also look at the topic of business process automation and what a CIO should be mindful of when embracing the shift from people running processes supported by technology to technology running processes supported by people. Hi, Benjamin. So good to see you. Welcome to Executive Insights.
Hi, Nasheen. Thanks for having me.
Benjamin, you and I go a while back, and in fact, we are alumni from UFA. You had your engineering degree from University of Alberta, but you made a career in technology sales and sales leadership. How did your training in engineering benefit your technology sales career?
Yeah, that's a great question. And it's funny to think about our alumni relationship and our experience working together in the past, Nasheen. What I'd say about that is for me personally, I've always been interested in technology. So a number one priority for me is always I have to be excited and passionate and interested in what it is that I'm involved with, whatever the technology might be, whatever the service offering might be, whatever that might be. I want it to be something that's ideally cutting edge, solving big problems. That's the kind of technology that excites me. And it's always been kind of in the sphere of things that I've worked with. The second thing is there's this relationship between engineering, and I'll say more specifically between being a professional engineer and sales. I think sales in general gets a little bit of a bad rap. You know, people have the used car mentality around the sales profession. But fundamentally, if you think about it, engineering and sales as well, in any job really, is built around integrity and trust. Right? So this is a foundation for professional engineers. You're expected to, of course, understand your field of practice, but you also need to conduct yourself in a professional and ethical manner. And so for me, that's always meant having my clients' interests at heart and in mind first, not my commission, not my quota, not the technology that I'm selling, not what I'm doing, but them. And I know it seems counterintuitive, but at the end of the day, what I'm trying to do is solve their problem, not try to sell them what I have, right? And that might have sometimes meant I've recommended something that wasn't related to my company. And for me, that was a way to actually make sure that I've always been viewed as a person with a high standard of integrity and trust. And finally, the final thing I would say is that you need to have a high say-do ratio. So conduct yourself, and what I mean by that, sorry, is how you conduct yourself is exactly you do what you say you're going to do, and you say what you're going to do, right? So when people know that they can trust you, you're always reliable and you're able to deliver on those things, and you're able to work in a field that you're excited about, you can be a really successful sales professional.
Very well said. Passion, trust, and credibility. So, very important factors. Now that we're in a pandemic situation for over a year now, and I think one of the biggest challenges for your profession is the disappearing of that face-to-face activity. And salespeople are so reliant on that. So, given the situation, what are some of the effective ways to engage with customers?
Yeah, it's a great point. I think this is one of the most challenging things these days. And what we've all experienced in terms of a loss is that relationship and connection that we now yearn for in working together, not just our social lives, but even our professional lives. And really, this comes back to my earlier point. This is a form and an effective way of building trust and establishing a relationship with someone. So for me, a couple of things that I've at least coached my team on, and I'm trying to do as much as possible, right, is try to connect live, make that the priority. It's not about emails, it's not about slide decks. It's really about having that conversation with the individual. I'll always take a face-to-face meeting if that was possible over a phone call or maybe a Zoom call, but I'll take a Zoom call over a phone call and I'll take a phone call over an email in that order of preference, because you really don't build relationship and trust through just the context of what you're saying. it's shared by the interaction that you have with the individual that you're working with. So I think that's the first thing I would say to anybody, and I'm encouraging my team to do, is make sure that you're trying to connect live and make that the goal. The second thing is, and that relates back to actually what I was talking about earlier, which is start with them, right? So you should always start with your client, or even if they're not a prospective client, that initial discussion is start with the problem. What are they trying to solve? Now, you may not know, or you might have an idea of what that might be, and that's okay. And you can bring forward some ideas and suggestions to get things started, to get that conversation started. But what you don't want to find yourself doing is turning your conversation into all about what I do or what my company does or what my technology does. You need to get as quickly as you can to what are the problems that they're trying to solve. And then you'll be able to identify whether or not you actually have something that can help them. They'll value the fact that you're actually recommending, a solution that might be able to help them with their problem. Or if you don't have something that can help them, saying that to them actually develops a form of trust. So making sure you connect live and actually starting with their problems is always an important thing to do. Something that I've always thought about, Nasheen, it was ingrained into my head a long time ago. An old manager of mine had this attitude, and I think it's something we should all think about, is you don't have to win every single project. You don't have to win every single deal. But what I strive to do is I want my clients to call me first, ask me about the problem first. And if I do have that opportunity then to share with them what the solution might be, at least I've had that first opportunity with the client, as opposed to them going down a path maybe that would be competitive to mine.
Yeah, very sound advice. And of course, on one side of the equation, we're talking about the customer engagement. On the other side is our employee experience. And, I remember at the very beginning of the lockdown last year, those of us who have had the privilege of being able to work from home kind of relish on the fact that, we get to spend more time with our families and we have more flexibility. But now it's been going on for over a year. I think it's really testing our collective patience. And also, it's pushing our mental and physical capacity to a limit. As a leader, how do you motivate a workforce who might be experiencing certain degree of burnout?
Yeah, it's a great question. I think it's a major problem that we're facing now. Um, and there's some fundamentals here that really, when you think about what I'm about to share, Nasheen, they aren't just related to COVID. I think just in general, these are things that we should try to bring into our daily lives, and especially post-COVID as well, right? So a couple of things that I would share. One is IBM has instituted this idea of a lead your best life. And this is a pledge that we've brought into our business in Canada to really say to our employees, we want you to lead your best life. We want our employees to have the best life they possibly can. So what does that mean? We've given some tips, some suggestions, some recommendations, and we're saying it's okay to take a lunch break, shut down, be away from your desk, right? Go out for a walk, eating healthy, exercising, trying to take some downtime, making sure you actually take it properly. I think that's extremely important for all of us to recognize. Everybody's going through this. We're all very empathetic to one another in terms of what we're going through. But if a company can actually take that sort of stance and make sure, especially the junior employees, understand that this is good and this is okay, that can help. The second thing I often tell people is start with why. And what do I mean by that is a lot of times what I find, especially as people are starting to get fatigued and tired, we tend to divvy out work. But if the employee doesn't have the context and the magnitude and the impact and the benefit we're driving, it sort of falls on deaf ears. So you may not get the result you're looking for. So I think it's important always to help the employee understand, what are we trying to do? Why are we doing it? And that'll enable them to actually have a greater understanding as to what we're doing and actually have more pride in the work that they're taking, right? The next thing that I'd say is, like, as much as possible, try to integrate some fun with work. We've been doing some things with our teams. I know some teams sure maybe fatigued from this in of itself, but if you can, have some sort of event, some sort of celebration, however big or small it might be, it's important to take time out to do that. We miss some of that, right? When you're in the office culture and people hear about a success, a wedding, a birthday, now we're not all in the room together, so we lose some of that. So, if you know of some opportunities like that, it can always, enlighten everyone and liven up the day. And one other final thing I'll share with the leaders out there that may be listening to this is something that I've been trying to do is just have one-on-ones with as many team members as you can. Spread it out. It doesn't have to happen all in one go, but try to meet with your team and let them have a chance to talk with you. A lot of times what I'm finding is, especially with more junior employees, they're interested in career development. They're curious about how things work at the company. So just giving them that forum to be able to have a discussion really does help. And I think I've gotten some really positive feedback from some of my team that I've been able to enjoy that with.
Yeah, those are excellent points and examples for other leaders to model after. I really appreciate your sharing that. I think in good times and bad, one of the key elements for motivating a workforce is to also provide them with a path to growth. I think IBM is known for really investing in career development for its workforce. Can you elaborate on what that entails? And also, as an employee, what sort of career development opportunities might I expect?
Nishi, that's a fantastic question. I had to say, I've been at IBM a little over a year and a half now. And I have to say that I've been blown away by the amount of education that IBM offers its employees. But not just the offering of the education, they actually make it a priority for our employees, right? So there's an expectation that you take advantage of the education, and we have all the mandatory things that you'd expect from a regulatory compliance perspective, HR, and those things that we need to do. But this is going above and beyond. We want our employees to continue to improve. We take pride in our people's capabilities, our people's intellect, and there's an expectation that we're constantly learning, improving, and evolving. So to that end, IBM offers really extensive training to its employees, a lot of capability built right inside the company. Of course, around technology, you pick a technology area, whether it's automation, artificial intelligence, blockchain, pick anything. They've got training on it. They've got certifications related to it. Also industry. So giving our employees the ability to learn more about how industries work, and the content is very relevant, very up to date. And even from a societal perspective, I'll give you an example, a personal one. I recently got a certificate for workplace mental health leadership. And that in and of itself was a very insightful course I found. And it was all about just well-being for not just myself, but of course for my team and my team members around me. So something that I've encouraged my team to do, because I think that what can happen in organizations is that training becomes just, you must do it. It's the mandatory compliance type training. And unfortunately, that ends up, having a little bit of a stigma associated with it. Instead, this is an opportunity to really grow for an employee, for an individual. And I tell my team that they should maximize this use of this opportunity that we have at IBM. Most companies that I've been at in the past don't have this robust a training curriculum. But even outside of that, if someone's not at IBM, that's okay. Invest in yourself. The content that is available today online, whether it's podcasts, sessions like this that we're in, Nasheen, or other formal training that's available, is remarkable. And we've got an opportunity now to continue to evolve and grow. And that can only serve to improve oneself.
Wow, that's really great to hear. We hear this type of say from many companies that they know their people is their biggest asset. But there's one thing to have lip service, there's quite another to actually practice what you preach. So speaking of career development, you started your career working for a company in the automation space, and now you've come in full circle being the partner of cognitive process automation and re-engineering. Wow. First of all, what does the fancy title mean?
That's a it's a mouthful, isn't it? So yeah, it's actually funny you should mention that. So I did start out my career in automation. It was in industrial automation. So I leveraged a lot of maybe more of my engineering background, even more so in that role. But when you think about the shift that we're going through, I'll come to the actual the title in a moment here. Fundamentally, we're seeing a shift in work, and I've heard this perhaps before, but people running processes are supported by technology is how we tend to do things. We're shifting towards technology running processes supported by people. So what does that mean, right? It means that we're now at a point where the technology can actually run the process end to end, and we, as the people, get to be the overseers. As an example, we know that the self-driving cars have the capability today to drive on their own, but regulatory and compliance and trust and, I think fear dictates that we need to make sure that we have people in the driver's seat still. So we're still overseeing the car, but the technology now can actually run itself. A common question that I often get when it comes to automation is, Benjamin, can we automate this process? And my short answer is yes. And the question I believe that should be asked is, should you automate this process? And then how can we best automate this process? So this comes to what is cognitive process reengineering and automation is all about. This is about understanding the process that your client is working. What's the problem that they're actually trying to manage, the workflow that they have, reimagining it using technology, using, I'd mentioned them earlier, automation, artificial intelligence, maybe blockchain. All of the capability exists today that we can really transform how our processes work and make that shift from people running processes supported by technology to technology running processes supported by people. Why do we want to do that? We're going to have greater efficiency. We're going to be able to deliver even better results to our customers. And we'll just overall as a company and our clients can just improve their businesses and radically change how they're doing business as a result of this.
Yeah, business process automation is certainly such an important topic for a CIO. But when it comes to embracing this shift from people running processes supported by technology to technology running processes supported by people, what should a CIO be mindful of?
So I think one of the key things, and many CEOs deal with this on a day-to-day basis, is first you have to recognize the complexity of your organization, right? It's not easy. It's not simple enough to simply say, well, let's just automate this process from start to finish. In many organizations, that process, if you follow it from start to end, you are hopping between different departments, between different teams. There's a variety of different stakeholders that come into play. So it's not easy to simply take a process and automate it from start to finish. So you need to take into consideration the organization. We also want to take into consideration the actual overall process itself. There tends to be, like in many technologies, we want to just jump in and see how we can apply a technology. I'll give you an example of robotic process automation. I've heard about it. You've seen how the technology can make a radical change, and they just want to bring it in and start using it. But if you don't do that upfront designing, the measurements, measure twice, cut once, you may find that you've actually limited your ability to automate a process. So understanding that process in detail, understanding where you can apply which technology becomes an important factor. So spending the time upfront to do design, the understanding of the impact, the business case, the value that it's going to deliver for the organization, all aids in ensuring that you're going to have the right expectations set with that process or set of processes, and the result that you're trying to deliver will actually be achieved. And then, there may be situations where you just have to pick the right battles and figure out how can you solve, the bulk of the problem. So a lot of times we're trying to solve 100% of the problems, but if you go back to that analogy as technology running process supported by people, well, if we can solve 80% of the process and people are only tackling, say, the 20% or the corner cases, that's fantastic. We've really flipped how the technology is working and how people are working. So we need to take all these things into consideration. The final thing I'll say is coming back to the org, but in a different light, is you need to think about what that future org looks like and how your people are now going to start to work and what that new vision looks like. And that becomes a conversation around your talent and how you're going to transform your talent and how that's going to evolve as you continue to bring this digital transformation, this technology and capability into your organization.
Yeah, very well said. Understanding what business problem you're trying to solve, pick your battles, and also be strategic to plan for the future. Thank you so much, Benjamin, for this thought-provoking and insightful discussion. I really appreciate it.
Thank you, Nasheen. I really appreciate you having spent some time with me.
You've been watching another episode of Executive Insights by the IT Media Group. Thank you for tuning in. If you enjoyed this video, please check out other technology and leadership-centric content on our YouTube channel, including roundtable conversations and executive interviews. And don't forget to subscribe.